Carter Sykes was hunched over his desk, a mug of cold coffee forgotten beside a stack of disorganized notes. His eyes, tired from hours of reading scientific papers on alien biology, scanned the screen. On the holographic display in front of him, a paper titled Biological Compatibility, Cross-Species Mating Protocols blinked back at him, offering little more than fragmented thoughts on human-animal hybridization. He sighed, rubbing his eyes. Another day, another theory to dismantle. Xenobiology, he had come to realize, wasn't as glamorous as it seemed. The sudden sound of the door sliding open broke his focus. "I've found it!" Qyartatha's voice rang out, her enthusiasm unmistakable, though her words made no sense. Carter barely looked up. Found what, exactly? A new way to make humans extinct by accident. He had been joking, but with Qyartath, it wasn't always clear. Qyartatha's Darner form, a tall figure with glowing patches across her body, stepped into the room. She was an alien with 6 arms, 3 of which held a stack of data pads. Her species, biologically sophisticated but culturally stunted, often misunderstood human customs. And though Carter found her curiosity borderline invasive, he couldn't help but admire her intellect. "No," she said, dropping the data pads onto his desk with a soft thud. "I've found a way to unlock your species' reproductive secrets." Carter blinked. That caught his attention. He looked up at her, eyebrows raised. "You've got to be kidding." "I'm not." She shuffled the pads, a string of incomprehensible alien gibberish flashing across the screens. "Your species possesses extreme genetic adaptability. The potential here is unprecedented. Your reproductive system has a degree of complexity that could benefit my people." Carter stared at her for a long moment. "My people? You want to study humans, again?" Qyartatha's eyes blinked, multiple sets of them in perfect synchronicity. "Not just study, Carter. Experiment. To help your species, of course. I need your cooperation." She sat down across from him, her multiple hands now neatly stacked on her lap, waiting with the patience of someone who had no concept of human discomfort. Carter rubbed his temples, his mind already reeling. "You're still on this? You know what? I don't even know why I'm surprised." Carter leaned back in his chair, propping his feet up on the desk. "What exactly are you planning? Cross-species something?" Qyartath didn't flinch, didn't even blink. "Human reproduction," she said as if discussing the weather. "The process. You are able to adapt to new environments, reproduce rapidly under stress. This is a key biological advantage, Carter. My species, well, we are stagnating." "Okay, let me get this straight," Carter interrupted, sitting forward now, his voice a mix of disbelief and reluctant curiosity. "You're telling me, an actual scientist, that you want me, to help you study human reproduction?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation, "and if you would just relax, we could begin the experiment immediately." Carter leaned back in his chair again, running his hands through his hair. "Qyartath, we've been over this. Humans aren't some test subject. This isn't a lab experiment. This is biology. Reproduction. It's personal." "I understand," she said calmly, "but I believe this is not just biology. This could be the key to saving my people. The future of your species and mine combined." Carter exhaled sharply. "You don't get it. You're not just studying breeding, you're studying relationships, emotions, trust. You can't just manipulate that." He leaned forward, catching her gaze, his voice serious. "This is beyond data, Qyartath. It's human. You can't just cross wires and call it research. It's not that simple." Qyartath tilted her head slightly, the gentle hum of her neural processor clicking in her throat. "I know it's complicated, Carter. But I also know the data is there, right in front of us. Your reproductive system is far more complex than you realize, and the benefits to my species could be substantial." Carter exhaled, exasperated, yet intrigued despite himself. "Substantial? You mean you want to use human reproduction for some intergalactic genetic breakthrough?" "I wouldn't call it use, but yes." Qyartatha's tone was calm, methodical. "Think of it as enhancing both species. Perhaps we can No, Carter cut her off, standing up and pacing around his desk. That's exactly what I'm saying. You're reducing human biology to a project. This isn't just about genes, Qirtoth. It's about people, about choices and boundaries. But those choices can be scientifically measured. That's the breakthrough. Qirtoth leaned forward slightly, a glowing hologram of human chromosomes flickering into view between them. Your species' adaptability could change everything. Don't you see? The potential is endless. If I can replicate even part of the human reproductive process, it will allow us to... Carter rubbed his forehead. He didn't want to admit it, but the idea was compelling. He had spent years studying the biology of alien species, and even his own had mysteries he couldn't ignore. But there was a line, a boundary that could not be crossed. No, Qirtoth. I'll help you, theoretically, if you want me to, but that's it. He leaned back, his voice softening, trying to bring reason into the conversation. I'll help you with your studies, your research. But there's no breeding happening here. Not on my watch. Got it? Qirtoth was silent for a moment, as though processing the weight of his words. Slowly, she nodded. I understand, Carter. I will respect the boundaries. But the data is important. It could benefit both of our species. Carter looked at her for a long time. She wasn't lying. She wasn't manipulating him. But the excitement in her voice, the drive, was unmistakable. He could see it, feel it, radiating from her like a force field. She needed this. And for some reason, he found himself caught in the gravity of her ambition. Fine, Carter said with a resigned sigh. You want to study human reproduction? I'll help you. But you better keep your hands off the personal stuff. This stays professional. Understood. Qirtoth's eyes flickered with a pleased, almost childlike joy. Understood, Carter. Thank you. I will begin preparations immediately. The lab smelled faintly of ozone and the ever-present metallic hum of alien equipment, its low vibration reverberating through the walls. Carter sat at his desk, the faint glow from his holographic monitor illuminating his tired face. The day had barely started, but the chaos of his new research project already loomed large. He had expected strange, sure. But this was absurd. Qirtoth stood across the room, her multi-jointed arms moving swiftly as she assembled the latest batch of data pads. Her deep blue skin shimmered slightly under the lab lights, her translucent veins pulsing with energy. She had spent the past few days reading everything human biology had to offer. And now, apparently, she thought she understood everything she needed to know. Okay, Carter, she said, her voice soft but filled with excitement. I'm ready to begin the first phase of the experiment. Carter looked up, eyebrows raised. We've already gone over this. What part of no did you not understand? Qirtoth clicked her tongue, a sound that Carter had long gotten used to, somehow both soothing and unsettling. We're not crossing any boundaries, Carter. I respect your wishes. This will be an academic exploration only, but you will participate in the data collection phase. She gestured toward the array of devices she'd set up, a few scanners, a DNA sequencer, and some human pheromone detectors. He sighed and sat back in his chair. Data collection, huh? You've got fancy toys, I'll give you that. Qirtoth didn't seem fazed by his sarcasm. They're necessary for my work. Your species' reproductive system is a treasure trove of genetic potential. The human genome contains markers for resistance to diseases and... I get it. Carter cut in, rubbing the back of his neck. You want to unlock the secrets of human reproduction. Just can we keep it scientific, okay? I don't want any, physical involvement. We're sticking to your academic exploration, right? Of course, Qirtoth said with a tilt of her head. Your willingness to cooperate is appreciated. I'll respect the boundaries. Carter crossed his arms. If this ends with me covered in more pheromones or some weird substance, I'm out. Qirtoth looked at him, confused for a second, before answering. I can assure you there will be no substances involved. Only data. Pure, scientific data. Fine, Carter muttered under his breath. Pure data. No more physical involvement. She stepped toward the console and activated a series of holographic projections. Let's start by analyzing your pheromone output, Carter. You'll need to stand still for a moment while I calibrate the sensors. Carter groaned internally, but complied, stepping into the center of the room where the sensor array was positioned. The machines hummed louder as they powered up, and Qwiretatha's delicate, six-fingered hands began typing commands with smooth, deliberate precision. So, what exactly are we measuring here? Are you planning to capture my mating scent or something? Carter asked with an eyebrow raised, trying to keep the situation light, even though his stomach was beginning to churn with discomfort. Exactly, she replied with no trace of sarcasm. Your species emits certain chemical signals when engaging in attraction. I will monitor the patterns, analyze how they fluctuate based on environmental factors and emotional responses. These pheromones play a critical role in your reproductive success. Carter chuckled dryly, his discomfort giving way to more nervous humor. Is this some kind of alien joke? You really think this is how humans work? Qwiretath didn't seem to catch the humor. It's the foundation of all biological reproduction, Carter. Your species' hormonal and pheromonal response during attraction is an excellent study subject. You should be proud. Humans are so efficient at reproduction. It's fascinating. I'll pass on the compliment, Carter said, his eyes narrowing as a soft, synthetic hum filled the room. Qwiretatha's sensors flared to life, projecting a light matrix of swirling data points around Carter's body. The air grew thick with the scent of sterilized metal and synthetic energy, but he could feel the oppressive weight of Qwiretatha's curiosity pressing against him. Every moment felt stretched, unnatural. Please remain still, Qwiretath instructed, her voice almost mechanical. I need a baseline reading. Carter suppressed a grimace. He wasn't a fan of being studied like this, especially not under such bizarre circumstances. But he'd made an agreement, however reluctantly. He closed his eyes and tried to ignore the uncomfortable sensation of the sensors gently probing his skin. He thought about the lecture he'd be giving later. At least he could return to something familiar after this. The quiet hum grew louder as Qwiretath moved around the room, adjusting the data readouts. Her sharp eyes never left the holographic projections. After a few moments, she exhaled softly, her voice filled with satisfaction. Interesting, she murmured. Your baseline pheromone levels are significantly higher than expected. There's a fluctuation in response, but it's not solely linked to sexual attraction. Great, Carter replied flatly, shifting his stance. So I smell weird, now? Just what I needed to know. Qwiretatha's many arms adjusted the settings, ignoring his comment. No, Carter. It's a normal human response. These pheromones are more complex than we anticipated. Not just tied to attraction, but emotional state and stress. Stress? Carter asked, his tone skeptical. What does stress have to do with anything? Humans emit pheromones in response to environmental changes as well. It's a form of social signaling. She paused. It's how your species communicates feelings subconsciously. Fascinating, isn't it? Carter shrugged, uninterested. Fascinating. I can't wait for you to write a whole paper on the stress pheromones of humans. Do you get funding for this? Qwiretath ignored him, her focus entirely on the data streams in front of her. Now, I'm going to adjust for external variables. You'll feel a slight pulse from the sensors. Don't be alarmed. Before Carter could respond, he felt a soft but sudden pulse of energy run through the air. It wasn't painful, but it was disorienting. His body tingled slightly as the sensors recalibrated. He looked up at Qwiretath, now noticing the slight shimmer of her skin. What are you doing now? He asked, feeling more than a little uneasy. I'm trying to see how your body reacts to heightened levels of pressure, she said, not looking up. You'll feel a sense of attraction toward, well, something. She flicked a switch, and a low sound rang out. Before Carter could protest, a slight magnetic field surrounding the sensor shifted, and he felt a sharp, uncomfortable sensation deep in his chest, almost like a pressure point. It wasn't painful, but it was invasive, sending a strange ripple through his thoughts. It was as if Qyrtoth was trying to force a response out of him. He froze, his heartbeat quickening. Qyrtoth, stop. This isn't. But before he could finish, the pressure eased. He looked at her sharply. You didn't warn me about that, he said, voice tight. This is not part of your academic exploration. Qyrtoth's head tilted slightly. I'm sorry, Carter. I didn't anticipate your reaction. But it's important for the data. The room felt heavier now, the air charged with both tension and the quiet crackle of scientific obsession. Carter rubbed his temples. This is getting out of hand. Carter sat at the kitchen table, a steaming mug of coffee in front of him. The comforting warmth of the liquid didn't calm his nerves. If anything, it only made him more aware of the uncomfortable situation unfolding around him. He watched as Qyrtoth moved around the apartment, preparing her experiment, as she called it. She had insisted that today would be the beginning of the next phase, human attraction. The lab was rearranged now, with a series of bioluminescent lights lining the walls, casting odd, shifting shadows. Various alien devices hummed softly in the background. The air was thick with the scent of something unfamiliar, a mixture of metallic and something sweeter. Pheromones, no doubt. Carter had tried to avoid thinking about it, but his mind kept returning to the experiment, the line that was being dangerously blurred. Carter stood up, pacing in small circles. Qyrtoth, I'm not sure about this. You've been reading way too much into these human behaviors. You really think attraction's some kind of scientific formula? Qyrtoth didn't look up from the array of sensors she was calibrating. Yes, Carter, it's data. Attraction is a physiological response. The pheromonal signals you emit during emotional fluctuations are easily measurable. If we understand them, we could enhance our species' adaptive capabilities. Perhaps even learn to replicate the process to allow us to evolve faster. The way she spoke, so cold, so detached from the emotional weight of what she was asking, irked him. Replicate the process? He asked incredulously. You mean you want to literally manipulate human attraction like it's some kind of chemical reaction? Her eyes flickered toward him, and she smiled, though it lacked any human warmth. Of course. Why else would I be studying your biology, Carter? He sighed, running his fingers through his hair. I'm beginning to think you see us as lab rats, Qyrtoth. No, she paused, looking at him for the first time in what felt like hours. I see you as an opportunity, Carter. An opportunity for both of our species. She motioned toward the instruments around the room. I'm merely trying to understand how your species interacts with its environment, biologically, emotionally, socially. She stepped toward him, adjusting a monitor on the wall, the glow from the screen reflecting off her smooth blue skin. Now, Carter, you understand that the human response to pheromones is heightened during stressful or romantic scenarios, correct? It's quite similar to how certain other species engage in mating rituals. But with humans, the situation is more complex. Your emotional state fluctuates so easily. She smiled again, but it was almost like a calculation rather than a friendly gesture. We'll have to test a few more variables to fully understand the reaction patterns. Carter leaned back against the counter, folding his arms. I told you before, this isn't some biological equation. You can't just isolate love and expect it to work on a spreadsheet. There's an emotional element here, a very human element. Her antennae twitched, signaling some internal processing. But how do you explain the fact that attraction is a biological imperative? You're driven to it by hormones and sensory data. Why should it be any different for us to understand it scientifically? Because it's not just biology, Carter insisted, his tone sharper now. Attraction, relationships, they're tied to feelings, to experiences. It's how we connect as humans. You can't just measure it. You have to live it. She tilted her head, clearly not understanding. But my species is not built for emotional engagement the way yours is. We, the Darner, have long since transcended emotional decision-making in favor of logical, collective thought. What you describe as feelings is inefficient. Carter's jaw tightened. The more she spoke, the more it was clear how out of touch her understanding of human nature was. Inefficient? So what, you think we humans are just dumb animals reacting to stimuli? He stepped toward her. You want to experiment on love? You can't. It's not something you can control, and it's not something you can study without consequences. Qirtoth paused, her 6 eyes blinking rapidly. I see you are frustrated. Her tone shifted slightly, perhaps attempting to acknowledge his discomfort. But my species needs this data. Without it, we stagnate. We have been for centuries. We are, frankly, a dying race. Your human adaptability offers us the hope of survival. The words hung in the air between them, thick with the weight of her desperation. Carter stood still for a moment, feeling the silence stretch. The whole premise of her experiment had shifted now. It wasn't just about understanding human biology, it was about saving her species, using human traits as a shortcut to salvation. The idea unsettled him. You're asking me to be part of your solution, Carter finally said, his voice low. But you don't understand what it means. If you manipulate human attraction, force it, even, you're robbing us of the essence of what makes us human. Qirtoth seemed to think on that for a moment, her glowing skin flickering softly. I see. But you still misunderstand. I'm not trying to force anything. My people simply do not experience the same emotional range that humans do. What if we could learn to control those emotions? What if we could evolve past our stagnation, as you say? Don't you want to help my species survive? I want to help your species, Carter replied, his tone softening. But not at the cost of ours. You can't force this. You can't use humans like lab experiments. I've been over this with you a dozen times. Qirtoth's features softened, though it was difficult to read her expression. I understand your position, Carter. I do. But I am trying to help both of our peoples. If you could see it the way I do, you would realize that your emotions, your human love, is simply an inefficiency we must eliminate to survive. Her voice took on a note of finality. Our species cannot thrive with such weaknesses. Carter felt a flicker of anger stir in him. Weaknesses. He laughed bitterly. You think emotions are a weakness? He stepped closer to her, no longer trying to hide his frustration. You don't get it, do you? The things that make us human, our emotions, our desires, they're what make us resilient. They're what help us adapt. You can't strip that away and still expect to survive. There was a long pause. Qirtoth seemed to absorb his words slowly, and for the first time, Carter saw a glimmer of something other than clinical curiosity in her eyes. Maybe understanding. Maybe regret. I see, she said quietly. Perhaps I have been too focused on data. Perhaps, she hesitated. Perhaps there is more to survival than I first thought. Carter stood there, unsure if he had made any real headway. But he had to try. You can't rush human nature, Qirtoth. You can't rush love. You can't just scientifically measure what makes us who we are. Qirtoth nodded slowly. I will take your words into consideration, Carter. She turned toward the console, her voice softer now. For now, let's stick to the data you agreed to collect. But I will try to learn more about human ways. I promise. Carter didn't know if he believed her, but he had to hope that she would learn, not just about the biology, but about the delicate complexity of human emotion. The kind of complexity she could never fully replicate with her algorithms and equations. The tension in the air was palpable. Carter sat across from Qirtoth, his hands tightly clasped together on the table. His eyes, bloodshot from lack of sleep and constant anxiety, flickered nervously toward the array of alien devices that cluttered his apartment. The room had become a chaotic blend of human and alien technology, each side existing like uneasy neighbors, unwilling to fully integrate. He had tried to hold on to the hope that it would end, that he could somehow talk Qirtoth down from the cliff she was racing toward. But it had been days since their last conversation, and she hadn't stopped, not for a single moment. She was still obsessed, still convinced that human emotions, human attraction could be replicated, controlled, and studied to benefit both their species. But now it was clear. The experiment had crossed a line. So, what's the next phase? Carter asked, his voice strained. His fingers drummed nervously on the tabletop, the rhythmic sound echoing in the otherwise silent room. Qirtoth didn't look up from the data readouts on her console. She was focused, consumed by her work. "The next phase is essential," she replied, her tone mechanical, detached. "I need to run a full physiological response test. I believe we are getting closer to the threshold where your emotional and hormonal responses can be triggered at will. This will give me the data I need." "You're really doing this, aren't you?" Carter said quietly, his voice tinged with disbelief. "You've crossed the line, Qyartoth. This is not science anymore. It's manipulation." Qyartoth didn't respond right away. She adjusted the settings on her screen, then paused, her 6 eyes blinking in synchronized silence. "Manipulation?" she echoed, as if the word didn't quite register. "No, Carter. This is observation. This is understanding. The data will provide clarity." Carter rubbed his forehead, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had been warning her, trying to make her see that what she was doing wasn't just about biology. But now he realized it was beyond that. He was a part of something much darker, something that could destroy the fragile balance between their species. "I don't think you understand," Carter said, his voice rising slightly. "This isn't some experiment. This is a violation. You're treating me like a specimen, like I'm some kind of lab rat. You can't manipulate human biology like this." Qyartoth turned to face him finally, her expression unreadable. "I'm not manipulating you, Carter. I'm gathering data. I'm seeking to understand your biological triggers. You agreed to help." Her words were calm, methodical. "I agreed to help, Qyartoth, not to become your test subject." Carter shot back. He stood up abruptly, pacing the room in frustration. "What do you even want from me, huh? You keep pushing, and for what? Some utopian dream where you can control human emotions? Where you strip us of everything that makes us human?" He stopped, staring at her. "That's not survival. That's destruction." Qyartoth remained motionless, her body still as she processed his outburst. "I'm trying to ensure survival, Carter," she said quietly. "You speak of emotions and instincts like they're sacred, but emotions do not ensure survival. They cloud judgment. My people are dying, and I need this data. Your emotions, your love, could be the key to saving us." Carter shook his head in disbelief, feeling the frustration claw at him. "You're wrong. My emotions are part of what makes me me. They're not just tools or resources to be harvested. You can't just take them from me and use them however you want." He turned away, trying to calm himself, but the words kept coming. "And you don't understand what you're asking. You think you're doing this for the greater good, but you're not. You're reducing everything down to some cold calculation. You're treating us like an equation." Qyartoth's voice was softer now, but her words still held weight. "Maybe you're right. I may not understand everything about humans, but I must understand. The survival of my species depends on this." She stood, walking toward him slowly, her eyes locked on his. "And perhaps, in time, you will understand as well. You're the one who agreed to help." Carter didn't move. He couldn't. He was caught in the crushing reality that this wasn't something he could walk away from. Qyartoth had already pushed so far past the point of no return. And with every test, every manipulation, the consequences were becoming more real, more dangerous. His own instincts were screaming at him to run, to shut down the experiment. But he couldn't. Not now. Not when it was too late. "Maybe I made a mistake," Carter said, his voice low, almost to himself. "Maybe I shouldn't have agreed to this. But it's not too late, Qyartoth. You have to stop." Qyartoth was silent for a moment, and Carter could see the gears turning behind her calm exterior. Then, in a movement almost imperceptible, she reached out and activated a nearby console. The holographic screens flashed and flickered as she adjusted the settings, shifting through data points and readings. "The experiment has already begun," she said, her voice unwavering. "You cannot stop it now, Carter." Her eyes softened, just for a moment before she added, "But I can promise you this. I will not force you into any more personal tests. We'll continue with the data collection, but no more invasive methods." Carter exhaled, his breath shaky. "I hope you mean that," he said, glancing at the console she had just activated. He felt a chill run through him as he thought about the implications of what she had just said. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I do, she said simply. Her voice softened. I may not understand your emotions, Carter, but I understand one thing. Without you, without your participation, this project will not succeed. And without it, my people will not survive. Carter turned toward her, the weight of her words pressing down on him. There was no easy answer to this. He could see now that the stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. The experiment wasn't just about understanding human biology, it was about survival, the very future of two species colliding at the edges of science and ethics. Then we'll continue, Carter said, his voice hardening. But make no mistake, Qyardoth, if I see any more signs of this, I won't be part of it anymore. I will stop you. Qyardoth nodded slowly, the dim light reflecting off her translucent skin. Understood, Carter. The room fell silent, the air thick with unspoken words. Carter wasn't sure if he had won a small victory or simply postponed an inevitable catastrophe. But he knew one thing for sure. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And as the weight of their agreement settled between them, he realized just how deep they were in this. How far they had both gone. Carter sat at the edge of the worn-out sofa, staring into the dimly lit room. His mind buzzed with the overwhelming weight of the last few days, but he couldn't shake the gnawing sense of impending consequences. He had agreed to help Qyardoth, thinking that he could control the experiment, guide it within the limits of his own comfort. But things had spiraled beyond his expectations. Now, the realization that he had crossed lines with irreversible implications was settling in, deeper with each passing moment. Qyardoth entered the room quietly, her 6 eyes scanning the air as if measuring the tension. She walked over to a table stacked with her research materials, holographic readouts, human samples, and alien equipment. There was an air of finality about her that unsettled Carter. You're unusually silent today, she said, her voice light, almost curious. Carter shifted uncomfortably, but didn't respond immediately. He had promised himself he wouldn't make this conversation an emotional outburst. It was time to have the conversation they had been avoiding, the one that could make or break their uneasy partnership. Qyardoth, he began, his voice a mix of exhaustion and determination. We need to talk. She turned toward him, tilting her head slightly. About what? Is there something wrong with the experiment? Carter let out a long breath, running his fingers through his hair. It's not about the experiment anymore. It's about us. Her expression remained neutral, but there was a flicker of something, uncertainty, maybe, beneath her composed exterior. What do you mean? He leaned forward, locking eyes with her. I've been trying to be patient. I've been trying to help you understand. But now, I see that I've made a mistake. Qyardoth raised a hand, an automatic gesture of reassurance. If you're referring to your discomfort with the tests, Carter, No, he interrupted, shaking his head. It's not that. It's the whole idea, the way you've approached all of this. You're treating human relationships, human biology, like they're just data points. Like you can measure and control them. He paused, struggling to keep his emotions in check. But you're forgetting one thing. Humans don't work that way. Love, attraction, they're choices, Qyardoth. And they don't fit into your neat little boxes. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she processed his words, analyzing them the way she had every other part of this experiment. Carter felt a pang of frustration. She had always approached everything from a purely scientific angle, but human emotion couldn't be compartmentalized. It wasn't like alien biology. It wasn't as simple as this happens, then that happens. He had tried to explain this to her countless times, but she never truly understood. I never said emotions were simple, she replied, her tone softer now. But they can be understood scientifically. You must understand that my species. Yeah, I know, Carter said, cutting her off. You're all about efficiency, logic, and removing the weaknesses that come with emotion. But that's the problem. You're looking at us as some problem to be solved. Not as people with our own experiences, our own choices. Qyardoth's eyes flickered. It was almost like she was seeing him for the first time. You really believe that love, attraction, is a choice? Carter nodded, his voice steady.
Yes.
It's not a biological reaction or a series of triggers. It's about who we choose to connect with, how we decide to bond with another person. You can't replicate that by pushing a few buttons. A long silence passed between them. Q-Wiretoth stared at him, her normally analytical mind racing to process the depth of his words. Her face softened ever so slightly, as if a tiny spark of understanding was forming.
I
understand now, she said quietly. You're saying that choice is what gives human connection its strength, not just the physiological reactions. Carter nodded, feeling a weight lift off his chest. Exactly. It's the freedom to choose. That's what makes us human, Q-Wiretoth. And you can't take that away. You can't reduce it to a formula. She stood still, her gaze distant as she absorbed the truth of what he had said. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she took a step closer to him. I thought I could control emotions. I thought I could harness them to fix my people's problems, to make us more like humans, stronger, more adaptable. She paused. But now I see that I've been wrong. You're right. Emotions aren't just biological, they're tied to freedom, to choice. Carter watched her, realizing just how much she had misunderstood. Q-Wiretoth wasn't malicious. She wasn't trying to harm him or humanity. But she had been blinded by her desperation to save her species, to fix what had been broken in her own people. She had lost sight of what truly mattered in the process. I don't expect you to understand everything about human emotions overnight, Carter said gently. But I do expect you to respect them, to respect the boundaries we have. She nodded, her eyes meeting his. For the first time in a long while, there was no calculation in her gaze, just quiet understanding. I will respect them, Carter. I will. They stood there in silence, the room feeling heavier than before, but in a way that wasn't suffocating. It was as though a line had been drawn, and for the first time, they were both on the same side of it. I know you're trying to save your people, Carter continued. But there's more to survival than just science. There's something deeply human in how we love, how we connect. You can't replicate that, no matter how much data you collect. Q-Wiretoth's voice was steady as she spoke. I understand now. I've been focused on the wrong thing. I've been too intent on measuring everything, on controlling it. But I see that emotions, human connection, are not something to be controlled. They are something to be experienced. Carter gave her a small smile. Exactly. And maybe that's the first step in finding your own way to survive. A quiet moment passed before Q-Wiretoth spoke again, this time with a note of curiosity in her voice. Do you believe it's possible for my species to evolve in other ways, Carter? Without relying on manipulation? Carter considered her question for a moment before replying. Yes. It's about adapting, yes. But it's about learning from your mistakes, from your experiences, not just from cold data. You need to find your own humanity, whatever that means for your people. Q-Wiretoth nodded slowly, her face thoughtful. I will try, Carter. I will try. Carter felt the tension between them ease, a sense of resolution settling in. They weren't finished, not by a long shot. But for the first time, it felt like they were heading in the right direction, one where respect for each other's differences and understanding would pave the way forward. As he turned to leave the room, he couldn't help but feel a faint H flicker within him. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to coexist, human and alien, without losing what made them both unique. And maybe, in the process, they could help each other survive.